Joining me today is ThatEricAlper, who is an accomplished music publicist and radio host of ThatEricAlper program on Sirius. He is here to share his interviewing tips and what is next for him. So welcome, Eric.
Hi, so good to see you as always.
Oh, likewise. So share, well, first, I'd like to go back to, can you share some of your background?
Yeah, I've been doing music publicity for the last 30 years. I started a record label, then a booking agency, then a PR company, all within a pretty quick timeline once I graduated university, and still kept doing the PR stuff. I loved hearing about the artist stories. I loved talking to the media and finding out what they were interested in, why they were writing about the things that they were. And because I can't be a rock star on stage, I might as well try to be the one that's kind of behind the scenes, actually working with the media on getting reviews or interviews or features and mentions in the media, whether that's the print traditional media or blogs or setting up interviews for podcasts or getting radio play on radio and on television. So it runs kind of the gamut of the traditional media that we all kind of grew up reading and knowing about, but also the new media with social media and TikTokers who now have their own kind of programs on that platform.
Yes. Is there a typical day, Eric, for you?
Yeah, usually I get up first thing in the morning, really, really early, around 6 or 7 o'clock, and set up my whole day on social media. Then from then on in, it's really just answering a lot of the emails that have come in overnight, because I deal with a lot of artists from different parts of the world, and I'm also pitching them locally in whatever city or state or country that they're in, along with North America. And then from then on in, it's just a matter of figuring out what press releases needs to go out today, what's urgent, and what follow-ups need to be done. So literally from about 7 in the morning until about midnight, I'm pretty active on the computer, answering emails and doing pitches.
Yes. And so, like some of the guests you've had on your radio program, can you share some guests that you had?
Yeah, I've had people from Sinead O'Connor to Bob Geldof, to so many artists. I mean, on the Canadian side, Randy Bachman and 5440 and Andy Kim and Honeymoon Suite, along with people like Ani DeFranco and just people that I love, people like John Prine, for instance, who or John Fogerty, just people that I really think are amazing and that I've long admired. So it's really a chance for me to kind of get into the mindset of what it's like being an artist without going too inside baseball too much, meaning that I don't really care about guitar chords. I don't really care about how they got that drum sound or how they end up writing the song, unless it's kind of open for your average music fan. I don't want to go too deep into the conversation, although we do get very deep when it comes to the actual psychological ups and downs of being an artist, and what happens when you have a #1 hit, and then what happens when your latest song doesn't reach the charts. I'm kind of not afraid to go there, because I know that everybody has those ups and downs, and hopefully the listener can learn something. Even if they're not a musician, they can learn something about what they're going through and what they went through and what their future holds for them.
Mm. So Eric, can you share some interviewing tips?
Yeah, I think the first one is, I mean, the research factor is has to be #1. Do way more research than you think that you already going to know. It's okay to write down 10 or 15 questions that you want to get to, but I got to tell you, after the first one, because of the way that I do my interviews, it's really asking the first question and listening very, very carefully to the answer and going off from there. What you don't want to do is ask the question, have an answer, and then immediately go to maybe question #2, unless you're digging deep on a story. I kind of go a little bit light because it's the way that I live my life and the way that, I want the interviews to be. But if you're in hard news and you're not getting the answer that you want right off the top, well, then you got to ask the question again or reword it so that maybe they'll answer it properly. Sometimes people are being a little bit evasive and sometimes they don't want to tell you what the truth is. But basically, go in with with what the person's background is, what their recent work is, put everything in context, put everything, the ups and the downs and the highs and the controversy. And that really, that strong prep really helps me figure out in case if I do want to get to somewhere, but they're not necessarily letting me or guiding me to that point, then I'm kind of going into the second or the third question. But usually it's, a lot of the conversations I have, I come with 30 or 40 questions. I'm lucky to get to, 3 or 4 of them only because I think we're just having a really good conversation.
Right. And it depends on what they're coming on the program for, right, Eric? Like if they want to plug their song or their tour, that's where you would go. Because they're there for a reason to
Yeah.
promote.
Yeah. And look, when I first started, the relationship between the media and the artist, and I'm going to kind of focus on the entertainment side because I can get to the news thing pretty quickly. But in entertainment, there was always that separation. You never asked the artist for an autograph. You never asked them for a selfie. You weren't going in. You could go in as a fan, but you have
Right.
to get the story about what you want the story to be, whether it could be controversial or it could be just something light. Lately, I'm going to say in the last, obviously 10 or 15 years, it's changed where, a lot of the media outlets are there to help promote the artist with whatever they're doing, with whether it's a new release or a new video or a new album or a tour. And, nobody wants to be cut off working in entertainment from asking a really bunch of hard questions that that they're not going to answer. You could be told by the publicist, please don't mention this. And then if you mention that, well, that Zoom call is going to end pretty quickly. And soon you'll be taken off of their list because you didn't kind of play the game. I know that the media is supposed to be separate from the artist, but with what I'm doing and with a lot of the people I'm working at and with, they're really, really happy to have that artist as part of their program or as part of their blog or part of the newspaper. So they're really they'll kind of say, look, I have to ask about this. Roger Waters and David Gilmour from Pink Floyd are always going to be asked, so is there a reunion? But you don't really have to ask that because the answer is going to be no. But I know that the editors always really want to ask that. So, you might want to kind of be a little bit lighter in that situation because that you're going to be, turned down for the real answer, which is going to be essentially no. And they're not going to tell you anyway. They're going to wait for their moment with the right outlet. So I think a large part of it is working together with the media to make sure that they get what they want, which is the content, and that the artist gets what they want in order to help promote whatever they're promoting.
Right. And if you want to have them back on your program, then you need to, it's building a relationship.
Yeah, I'm here to make friends. I'm not here to make enemies, and look, I'm not, there's great people out there who will gladly write 6,000 words on a life story and a lot of the downs more than the ups. I'm not that person. And so I've kind of built a little bit of the side of the road for what I'm comfortable with. And it's not really what I do. I'm a publicist. That's what I do during the day. Everything else that I do in terms of the radio show or going in the media and talking about music or music news, that's all fun. And I never want it to damage either A, my reputation, B, the band's reputation. Because I don't want somebody coming up to me and saying, hey, how come you slammed me in that interview? It's I don't talk about negativity stuff. I don't talk about legal issues, and I don't talk about anything controversial in the media. And I plan to keep it that way.
What about some strategies for someone, like you have a guest that doesn't really talk, they give you a yes or no answer? Have you come across that?
Yeah, there's a couple of times where that's actually happened to me, especially in the beginning. And part of it, I realized that I wasn't really asking the right kind of questions. Part of it is in the way that you ask the question, have it so open-ended that they can't respond with yes or no. What I found three words totally helped me out when I heard about this. And the way that you ask it is, in what way? So instead of asking, did you have fun on the tour? Yes, of course they did. Or no, it was miserable. In what way did this tour differ from the last one? In what way did you feel better about going out on tour than maybe in the years past? In what way did the tour change halfway through? Or did you make any changes from the get go to make it more comfortable for you? In what way did the musicians get comfortable? So if you ask it to not be an open-ended question, but look, there's times when they're not going to give you anything. And I've actually been around interviews where the artist that I was promoting was giving 1 or 2 word answers, and the interviewer stopped the interview and said, look, you're not giving me anything, so we can wrap it up if you don't want to do it, or you can kind of start giving me some real answers. And sometimes the artist was like, fine, and then walked out with their pack of cigarettes and their drink and be like, fine. Most of the time they're like, sorry, I just had a really bad day, or now that I know, maybe you needed a half hour's worth of content rather than 6 minutes of something. So have them know how long the interview is going to be, short or long, because that's going to affect the answer. Whenever I'm doing an interview in the media, even if I know for sure that there's going to be one segment of 8 minutes, I'm always asking, because breaking news happens all the time. So sometimes you get your segment caught. And the other times you kind of want to make sure that there's no changes, because maybe the guest after you canceled. So now you're kind of doing now 2 segments of 15 minutes. So it helps me to know how short or long my answers are going to be. And that's a really good tip, I think, to let the subject know, hey, we've got 13 minutes. So, I've been in situations with my radio show where I ask a question and literally 19 minutes later, they answer it. And the question was, hey, man, how you doing? And that was it. And just off to the races. And I can't use any of it because it's essentially a TED Talk monologue that is going to bore the list, the listener and the viewer, kind of like how it is now for me. But realistically, if I let them know it's 13 minutes, I got to keep it super tight. So give me a couple of lines for each one, and we'll just have a conversation like we're backstage at a concert.
Great information. And Eric, is there any other tips you like to add?
Yeah, I think in other than in what way, I'm always asking about a specific moment, like tell me about the time of this, tell me about the time of that, can you give me an example, or what did you do here? So this way, the more specific they are, the more deeper into everything that they'll end up being. And it's funny because on my radio show, I never use video at all, ever. And even if it's to promote the segment, I never use video. But I like video so that I can see the person, to know that I'm not interrupting them. And sometimes silence actually speaks a lot louder than them talking. So don't be afraid to let those silences happen, because sometimes if you're looking at them, they're just thinking rather than letting you know that they are done talking. Pick up on that body language, because it's so super important, because you don't want to interrupt them unless they're going off on a complete tangent and like they're not going anywhere. I think it's okay to interrupt them, but sometimes it's just better to let people talk, because it's what the police do when they've got a criminal in the room. They just let them talk. And if the silence happens, it gets them uncomfortable. So it gets them talking more to fill up that silence. And sometimes they're going to reveal something that they wouldn't otherwise think about revealing.
Yeah, no, it's great. And it's like, for me, it's like, it's all about the guests and making it a great conversation. And Eric, it's such great information you've given us. And I appreciate your time. And did you want to share what's next for you, or anything you like to add?
I'm planning on sleeping for a couple of days when this year ends. And other than that, keep plowing ahead and just keep doing what I love. People who work in the media are really special people. they're fans of the media, they're fans about what they do, and we need more of them. So thank you for helping bridge that gap and bringing on the next generation of media people, because it's kind of a little bit scary out there, but we need them more than ever before.
Well, thank you, Eric, for your time. And yeah, I guess we'll chat soon. So
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Christine. We'll talk soon enough.
thank you, Eric.